Hi guys, how are you today? Okay, so today we are going to be talking about how to express your opinion using the comparatives and superlatives. This is in order to answer the question when someone asks you which is better or what do you think, what do you prefer, what's your favorite. Well, we can say, well, my favorite is, for example, talking about sports, you could say soccer, and then usually you have to explain why, right? So today we are going to check a couple of structures to explain why we prefer something over the other, and these structures are the comparatives and the superlatives. So if, as you remember, we have been studying comparatives and superlatives for a couple of semesters now, so today we're going to do a quick review. We are going to go through them very quickly just to remind you how and when to use one or the other, okay? So first of all, how do we know what we need to use? If we need a comparative or we need a superlative? Very, very easy. If you're comparing two elements, you definitely need a comparative, okay? When you're comparing two elements, we are going to use a comparative structure. What's a comparative structure? The ones that you have on the screen right now. What makes a comparative structure? First of all, and most importantly, two elements to compare. If you don't have two elements to compare, it doesn't work, okay? We need to do this when you are comparing two elements. Normally, we are going to use this structure when someone asks you, which one do you prefer, this or this? And then you compare both elements using this. Okay, what's the structure like? If you want to mention that one thing is above the other, we are going to use either one of these two. The first one, for example, if you're comparing soccer and surfing, you're going to say, for example, playing soccer is cheaper than surfing. In this case, you are showing that one is better than the other. The same with the second one. Rugby players are, in this case, we are adding the word more muscular than swimmers. But it's the same. You are showing that one thing is better than the other. Okay? So, when we want to say the opposite, when you want to say, for example, that one thing is less than the other, well, you use the opposite structure, which is this one. Golf is less dangerous than boxing. Okay? So in this case, this is the complete opposite. We could say this sentence with the same meaning using one of the previous structures, just changing the elements. For example, we can say that boxing is more dangerous than golf. Okay? Very good. That's when we want to indicate like that something is inferior, that something is less than the other. And when we want to talk about equality, that two compared elements are similar in one thing, well, we can use the last structure. We can say, for example, that ice skating is as demanding as athletics, okay? In this case, we are not talking that one is better than the other, but that they are both similar, at least in the case of the demand that they have, okay? So, what's the structure like? Basically, the first thing you need to do, whatever the case is, whether you want to say that one thing is more and one thing is less or that they are similar, the first element is the first thing that you are comparing. Playing soccer, rugby players, golf, ice skating, whatever you want to say, but that's the first. Then you need the verb to be. The verb to be obviously is going to be conjugated singular or plural depending on what you want to say, right? And then you have your adjective in comparative form. What's the adjective in comparative form? Well, if you remember, in some cases, the adjective needs to have the letters er added. In some other cases, instead of adding more than the word, we just add more. For example, more muscular, more dangerous, etc. When we are mentioning that something is the opposite, that something is less, well, in that case, we have no problem because we use the word less, right? In all cases. And finally, when we are talking about equality, well, the structure of the adjective is as, the adjective, and then as again. That's the only one that doesn't have the word than. In the other ones, you need to use the word than. And finally, you have the last element, the second element that you are comparing. Surfing, swimmers, boxing, athletics. Okay? That's when you're comparing, when you have two elements and you're just making the comparison among only those two elements. What happens if I want to include more elements? Well, in that case, that's time for a superlative. What superlative for? Superlative is not to compare. Superlative is to show that something is superior, that something is above the rest. It could be among 3 elements, among 4, among 1 million elements, but you are talking that something is somehow superior than the rest. For example, you can say, I think baseball is the easiest sport. Among all the sports in the world, I think baseball is the easiest sport. Okay? We can say, for example, Ashley Wagner was the most graceful ice skater in the Olympics. I mean, among all the people, among all the skaters that were in the Olympics, she was the most graceful. Or we can say that chess is the least demanding sport regarding physical condition. Okay? Among all the sports, that's the least demanding. The thing with superlative is that you can say that something is like the superior above all the others, or you can say that something is inferior, but you can never have equality. That is why we don't have any structure that shows equality. Okay? Why? Because you're talking about like or above or below, but not similar. If you want to mention equality, well, you use a comparative, right? And as you can see, it's similar, the structure, the adjectives, obviously the words change. Do you remember why in some cases we add est to the word, or in why in some cases we use most? No? Well, don't worry. I prepared this chart for you, so maybe it is easier to remember in what cases we need to do what. So, just a quick recapitulation, right? When we have one syllable adjectives, like cheap, for example, if I want to make a comparative, I just add the letters ER. And if I want to make a superlative, I add the word the and then EST, right? Easy peasy. When I have a one syllable adjective, but that it ends in a consonant and a Y, like easy, we need to transform that Y into I, and then we add, if it's a comparative, ER, and if it's a superlative, EST, right? When I have one syllable adjective that finishes with a consonant, vowel, consonant. I mean, que sus últimas 3 letras sean a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. For example, thin, H, consonant, I, vowel, N, consonant. We need to duplicate the last consonant and then ER in the case of comparative or EST in the case of superlative, right? Careful with that. Now, when the adjective has 2 or more syllables, I don't modify it, but I add, if it's a comparative, I add the word more. If it's a superlative, I add the most, right? Any adjective with 2 or more syllables, with the exception of the adjectives that have 2 syllables, but they end in letter Y, right? And when they end in letter Y, we only modify it. We change it for I, like these ones, and then ER or EST. And finally, we have the exceptions, the irregular, good, better, best, bad, worse, worst. I hope this has helped you to remember, to remind you how comparatives and superlatives work, and then we can apply it into our sentences about sports. Let me know if you have any questions. Text me and I'll be happy to answer. Bye.